You ever lose someone you love, and just when you're trying to hold on to the pieces they left behind, some stranger comes along and tries to rip it all away? That's what happened to me 2 days after I buried my grandpa, when a woman I'd never met stormed onto my family's ranch, waving a piece of paper like it was a loaded gun, demanding I pay her $750,000 or lose everything. This is the story of how I fought back, how I turned the tables on a bully who thought she could steal my home, and how I learned that sometimes justice feels like a cold, hard slap in the face. It was September, early morning, and I was standing in the gravel driveway of my grandpa's ranch, our ranch, I guess, now that he was gone. The old Ford's engine was still ticking as it cooled, and I held his handwritten deed in my hands, the paper soft as cloth, the ink faded but stubborn, like the man who wrote it. The ranch was 150 years old, built before this state even had a name, a sprawl of 200 acres with a timber barn that stood like it was daring the wind to try something. The air smelled like hay and iron, and the cattle were grazing out in the distance, their tails flicking lazily in the late summer sun. I ran my hand along the split-log fence, smooth as glass from a century of hands and weather, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt a flicker of peace. Grandpa's tools were still in the shed, hung neat as a pin, his great-granddad's brace and bit, a set of wrenches that still turned like they were brand new. This place wasn't just land. It was a story, our story, carved into every board and fence post. I thought I could finally breathe, maybe start healing, until a pounding on the front door shattered it all. It wasn't a knock, not the friendly kind you get from a neighbor dropping off a pie. This was a hard, angry smack, like someone was trying to punch through the wood. I stepped out of the shed, boots crunching on the gravel, my stomach already knotting up. Nobody knocks like that out here, not unless they're looking for trouble. Before I could even get to the porch, the door swung open, and there she was, some woman I'd never seen, standing in my grandpa's living room like she owned it. She was in her late 50s, maybe, wearing a pantsuit so crisp it looked like it was allergic to dirt. Her hair was sprayed into a helmet, her face pinched tight, like she was permanently annoyed with the world. She held a clipboard like it was a badge of honor, and her eyes locked onto me with the kind of smugness that makes your skin crawl. "You the new owner?" she barked, her voice sharp enough to slice through steel. I stopped dead on the threshold, stunned by her nerve. "I'm Luke Harper," I said, keeping my voice steady. This was my grandpa's ranch. She didn't offer her name, didn't say a word about my loss, just marched forward, heels clicking on the old pine floors, and shoved a piece of paper in my face. It was printed in this loud, ugly font, red letters screaming "Final Demand" at the top. "You're in violation of the Crestwood Meadows HOA bylaws," she said, tapping the paper with a manicured nail. "Accumulated fees, fines, penalties $750,000. You owe it, and you owe it now." I stared at her, then at the paper, my brain trying to catch up. $750,000? That was half the value of the ranch, maybe more. "Ma'am," I said, slow, like I was talking to someone who'd lost their mind. "This ranch has been in my family since 1870. There's no HOA out here." Her lips curled into this little smirk, the kind that says she knows something you don't. "Oh, there is," she said, "and you're part of it. Your grandpa ignored his obligations, and we've been patient, too patient." She pointed out the window, her fingers shaking like she was accusing me of a crime. "Unregulated livestock, non-compliant fencing, that unapproved barn, it adds up." I looked at the notice again. The seal at the bottom looked wrong, like something you'd print off a cheap inkjet, not a county stamp. My 30 years as a firefighter kicked in. Calm. Assess. Find the facts, but this wasn't a fire. This was an invasion. My grandpa owned this land free and clear, I told her. "It predates your subdivision by a century. You've got no jurisdiction here, and you need to leave." She laughed, this short, nasty sound. "I'm Linda Grayson, president of the Crestwood Meadows HOA, and I decide what's what. You've got 1 week to pay, or we start foreclosure. Don't test me, Mr. Harper." And then she was gone, the screen door slamming behind her, leaving me standing there, the paper crumpled in my fist, the piece of the ranch poisoned. I spent the next hour just staring at that notice, the number $750,000 burning a hole in my head. It was absurd, but it wasn't a joke. This woman wasn't just mistaken. She was a predator, and she'd just declared war. I'm a firefighter, retired now, but I've faced chaos before: house fires, car wrecks, people screaming for help. You don't panic, you act. So I went to Grandpa's old roll-top desk, the one he'd spent hours at, paying bills, writing letters, keeping records. The man saved everything, used to say. Paper beats talk every time. I started digging through drawers, tax receipts from the 50s, cattle sale records, equipment manuals, until I found it, tucked in the back of the bottom drawer. A leather-bound ledger, the cover worn soft, the title faded but clear: Harper Ranch County Records. Inside was a treasure trove: Grandpa's notes, every conversation with county officials, every permit, every tax payment, all in his neat, careful handwriting. And then, wrapped in oiled paper, a survey map from 1870, showing the ranch's 200 acres, marked with landmarks still standing: the big cottonwood by the creek, the stone ridge out west. No crestwood meadows, no subdivision, just open land for miles. Behind it, a county ordinance from 1987, when the subdivision was built, with a sticky note in Grandpa's writing. Section 4, paragraph: agricultural properties pre-1950 exempt from HOA covenants. He'd known all along they had no claim. He must have thought they'd back off, just noise that'd fade away. That map, that ordinance, was my shield, my proof. But Linda wasn't playing by the rules. A couple days later, I was out checking the fence when a shiny black SUV rolled up, followed by a sedan. Linda stepped out, flanked by two HOA board members: a nervous woman with a notepad, scribbling like her life depended on it, and a big guy, Greg, with a measuring tape slung over his shoulder like he was about to stake a claim. They weren't here to talk. They were here to take over. "You're trespassing," I said, my voice low, the kind I used when I needed to be heard over a roaring fire. Linda held up another paper, this one labeled Warrant of Inspection. It looked even faker than the first. "We're here to check for code violations," she said, loud, like she was performing for a crowd. Greg took a step forward. "Just need to measure some setbacks, check the fencing." I didn't budge. "That's not a warrant. A real one signed by a judge, and you'd have a deputy with you. Get off my land now." The woman, Ellen, froze, her pen hovering over her notepad, looking to Linda for a cue. Linda's face hardened. "You're interfering with official HOA business," she snapped. "We'll be back." They piled into their cars and sped off, kicking up dust, but I knew what they were doing: building a paper trail, fake violations to justify a lien. This wasn't a mistake, it was a heist. I started treating the ranch like a fire line. I bought a digital voice recorder, kept it in my pocket, always on. My phone became my weapon. Every time Linda's SUV cruised by, slow and predatory, I snapped a photo, the date, time, and GPS stamped on it. I kept a logbook, just like at the fire station. Tuesday, September 10th, 9:22 a.m., black SUV, license plate ABC 456, parked across the road, driver Linda Grayson. Every letter, every call, every threat, I wrote it down. One night, I laid her fake notice next to a real county tax bill. The county seal was crisp, detailed, with the state bird and motto etched in tiny letters. Linda's? A blurry eagle, the kind you'd buy at a craft store, labeled official county seal, with no county name. Forgery. A felony. I had her dead to rights. But she wasn't done. A few days later, a sheriff's patrol car pulled up. Two deputies stepped out, cautious, not aggressive. I met them on the porch. "Afternoon, officers," I said, calm as I could manage. The older one, Deputy Harris, nodded. "We got a call about a trespasser. Some woman, Linda Grayson, says you're refusing to leave." I didn't flinch. "I'm Luke Harper. This is my grandpa's ranch, and I'm the executor of his estate. Come inside, I'll show you." They followed me in, and I laid it out: a 1870 deed, Grandpa's will, my ID, the forged notice with its fake seal. "She's trying to steal my home," I said, pointing to her letter. Harris leaned in, his eyes narrowing at the seal. "This ain't right," he muttered, glancing at his partner. "We're required to respond to every call, Mr. Harper, but it looks like she misrepresented things. Sorry for your loss." They left, and I felt a spark of hope, but I knew Linda. This would only make her madder. Friday night, my dog started growling, low and serious, not his usual bark. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. Headlights cut across the pasture, then peeled out down the road. I swept the beam across the yard, nothing until I hit the barn. Nailed to the double doors was a sign, 4 feet by 4, screaming red with white letters. Violation. Property seized by Crestwood Meadows HOA. It was like a knife in the gut, those nails driven deep into Grandpa's barn. I pried it down, my hands shaking, and took photos of the damage. This wasn't just harassment. It was vandalism, a declaration of war. I knew I couldn't fight alone. I called my old friend, Jim Carter, a retired county engineer who'd written half the codes in this county. He showed up with a beat-up briefcase and a notebook, took one look at my evidence, and spent an hour reading deed, ordinance, logbook, photos. "Luke," he said, sipping coffee, "this isn't just illegal, it's impossible. Your ranch predates their bylaws by a century. They've got no claim, it's like trying to tax the moon." But he wasn't done. He called a contact on the HOA's review committee, a woman fed up with Linda's bullying. An hour later, an email arrived, a chain of messages from Linda to her board, dated right after her first visit. I read it, and my blood ran cold. "He's just a grieving old man, doesn't know the rules. Push him with fines. He'll sell cheap to make it stop." It was a confession, plain as day. She knew she had no claim, she was trying to break me. I called a meeting with the neighbors, Big Mike, a grizzled vet from down the road, the Thompsons, whose farm was as old as mine, and a couple from Crestwood Meadows who'd been fined for their mailbox color. We met in Big Mike's barn, and I laid it all out: the deed, the ordinance, the forged seal, Linda's email. Big Mike slammed his fist on the table. "That snake," he growled. Everyone had stories: fines for grass height, threats over paint colors. They were done. They offered statements, ready to testify. I wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, I went to the bank to handle estate paperwork. The teller, a friend I'd known for years, typed my info and froze. "Luke, there's a problem. Your accounts for Xena lien from the HOA filed yesterday." My heart sank. Linda had gone for the jugular, cutting off my money so I couldn't fight back. The bank manager showed me the filing, another fake, backdated to look older, but it was enough to lock everything down. I drove home, the world a blur, fear clawing at me. I was losing the ranch, everything my family had built. I sank into Grandpa's old armchair, the leather creaking around me, and the grief I'd buried came flooding out. I was failing him. Then, footsteps on the porch, Linda, standing in the doorway, the sun behind her like some dark angel. "I see you got the bank notice," she said, her voice dripping with fake pity. "You should have followed the rules, Luke. We'll take possession soon, maybe you'll find a nice apartment in town." I just stared, empty, beaten. She'd won. She stood there, savoring it, then turned to leave. But as she did, something snapped in me. I remembered who I was: not just Luke Harper, grieving grandson, but Luke Harper, the man who'd spent 2 years campaigning across this state, shaking hands, promising to fight for people like me. The man who'd won an election 3 weeks ago. The man who, in a few days, would be Governor Luke Harper. Inauguration day was cold, the sky a sharp, endless blue. I stood on the Capitol steps, hand on a family Bible older than the ranch, my other hand raised, calloused from years of fighting fires. Big Mike was in the crowd, grinning like a kid, next to Jim, who gave me a nod. They weren't just here for Methy, were here for everyone who'd been pushed around by petty tyrants like Linda Grayson. My speech was short. Fairness, protecting regular folks, government as a shield, not a sword. Then came the meet and greet, cameras rolling, local news streaming live. And there she was, Linda, pushing through the crowd, clutching an envelope, her face lit up with triumph. She thought she was about to humiliate me, one last time, in front of the whole state. "Mr. Harper," she said, loud enough for the microphones, "this is the final demand from Crestwood Meadows HOA. Your time's up." The reporters leaned in, cameras zooming. My security team started to move, but I waved them off. I took the envelope, held it up, and stepped to the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice calm but carrying. "This is a fine example of what folks in our state face every day: good people harassed by corrupt HOAs with no oversight." I looked at Linda, her smirk fading. "These groups are meant to protect property, not forge documents, file fake liens, and steal homes from grieving families." The crowd gasped. I kept going. "My first executive order, signed today, creates a task force to investigate HOA corruption, starting with Crestwood Meadows." Linda's clipboard slipped, clattering to the ground, her face white as chalk. I turned to Sheriff Dan Rogers, who'd seen the evidence, who'd been burned by her lies before. "Sheriff," I said, "this woman's committed felonies, forgery, fraud. Do your duty." He stepped forward, voice steady. "Linda Grayson, you're under arrest." The handcuffs clicked, loud as thunder, and the crowd erupted, Big Mike whooping, applause rolling across the lawn. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. 3 months later, the ranch is quiet again, the good kind of quiet. The task force tore through Crestwood Meadows like a wildfire. They found Linda's rubber stamp, her computer files with fake warrants, emails showing years of shakedowns, old folks fined for garden gnomes, families hit for window shades. Her board caved, spilling everything. Linda resigned in disgrace, the judge calling her scheme a campaign of malice and greed. The HOA paid back $1.2 million to homeowners, and my account was unfrozen the day after her arrest. I won because I checked the facts. Grandpa's ledger was my rock. I documented everything. Me logbook and photos were my armor. And I didn't fight alone. Jim, Big Mike, the neighbors, we were unstoppable together. I fixed the barn door, filled the nail holes, sanded it smooth, and oiled it until it gleamed. I thought about replacing the boards, but those scars are part of the story now. I hung a new sign, Harper Ranch, built 1870, still standing. Tonight, we're having a barbecue. Big Mike's at the grill, Jim's lecturing some new folks about water rights. Kids are chasing fireflies in the pasture. The fear's gone. We're just neighbors, free, laughing under the stars. But here's the thing, Linda's in jail. But there are others like her out there. People who twist rules to control, to take. I'm governor now, and I can change laws, but laws don't fix everything. What do you do when someone tries to bully you out of what's yours? Do you fight, document, rally your people, or do you walk away? Drop a comment, tell me your story, because I'm listening, and I'm betting you've got a fight like this in you too.